May 23, 1992. At 5:56 p.m., a man crouches on a hillside above a Sicilian highway, gripping a remote control wired to 500 kilograms of explosives buried beneath the asphalt. Below him, a white Fiat carries the one person the most powerful criminal organization in European history has decided must die today. Giovanni Falcone isn't a soldier or a spy. He's a judge who exposed a $14 billion heroin empire using the only weapon the mafia never thought to guard against bank receipts. For 10 years, he did what every prosecutor in Italy was told was impossible. He made a mafia boss break the code of silence that had protected Cosa Nostra for a century. He put 338 members on trial in steel cages and won 19 life sentences. He built a machine designed to keep prosecuting after he was dead. So the mafia detonated a crater into a national highway. But killing him was the one mistake that would finally destroy them. How did one man turn a century of silence into the largest criminal trial in history? And why did the mafia's most brutal act become the weapon that dismantled it? Sicily does not start as a crime problem. It starts as a governance vacuum. How do you survive in a place where the national state arrives late, leaves early, and never learns your name? Cosa Nostra answers with the oldest product on earth: protection. Protection with a price, backed by a pistol. By the mid-20th century, the organization controls rural estates, urban construction, wholesale markets, and municipal water distribution across western Sicily. Over decades, it calcifies into a parallel administration, one that never holds elections, never publishes laws, and still decides who gets building contracts, who gets running water, who gets buried without a funeral. In practice, it operates as a shadow ministry with better attendance records and far more decisive enforcement. If you know the mafia only through American films, you picture a parasite feeding off society's edge. Sicily's mafia sits closer to the center, touching daily life. It collects pizzo from every shopkeeper to prove it controls the street. It rigs public works contracts to prove it controls the state. It sells water from private wells in drought months to prove it controls something older than political thirst. And its real weapon is not the gun. It is the absence of witnesses. Omertà, a code of silence so deep that prosecutions dissolve like sugar in espresso. No testimony, no named organization, just individual criminals, as if murder is a solitary hobby. This is where the mafia becomes functionally invincible, not because it outsmarts the state, but because it makes the state blind. And when blindness fails, it uses the older method. It kills the people trying to see. August 6, 1980. Palermo's chief prosecutor, Gaetano Costa, is shot dead. July 29, 1983. Investigating magistrate Rocco Cinici is obliterated by a car bomb. 2 bodyguards die. The building's concierge dies. The mafia does not just eliminate you. It eliminates everyone near you. It turns risk into a contagion. Every handshake with a prosecutor becomes a potential death sentence for your doorman. Each assassination triggers the same state promise: this time will be different. And each time, Sicily hears the translation and waits for us out. Outrage has a short half-life. Cosa Nostra does not need to defeat justice forever. It only needs to delay it past the next news cycle. But before Cinici dies, he tries something new. He creates a pool, a team of magistrates who share files, share signatures, share the target on their backs, so no single judge can be isolated and erased. After Cinici's murder, Antonino Caponetto formalizes the anti-mafia pool. Into that pool steps a man who looks like your friend's warm uncle, thick mustache, soft voice. Giovanni Falcone is not a movie hero. He is a method. He starts where Cosa Nostra assumes no investigator can start: bank records, wire transfers, shell companies. The money trail. Bullets do not leave receipts, but heroin profits do. Falcone treats the mafia like a multinational business, not a tribal brotherhood. Map the relationships, trace the investments, turn cash into indictments. And here you feel the first crack, not in the mafia, but in the state itself. Falcone faces jealous colleagues who treat his competence as a career threat, bureaucrats who regard courage as a political liability, and a judiciary where promotion hinges on seniority, not survival. He keeps working. By the early 1980s, his investigations collide with something larger than Sicily: heroin. By the late 1970s, multiple refineries were operating across the island, processing morphine base into heroin that supplied a massive share of North American demand. The profits were staggering, hundreds of millions cycling through Swiss bank accounts, shell companies, and pizza parlors in New York. Falcone grasps what no Sicilian magistrate before him fully acted on. If you fight a global enterprise with local tools, you lose. So he does something the Italian bureaucracy despises more than crime. He cooperates, building working relationships with the FBI, Swiss financial investigators, anyone who can squeeze the pipeline from the other end. In Palermo, that is heresy. To the mafia, it is existential. The wall is being attacked from both sides. But money can map the shape of the beast. It cannot make the beast confess. And in Sicily, the beast has never once admitted it exists. How do you prosecute an organization whose first rule is that it has no name? And what does it take to convince a man who has lost everything that betraying the mafia is the only revenge left? Every empire hits a moment when its internal violence outgrows its ability to hide. Cosa Nostra reaches that threshold in the early 1980s. A civil war erupts, the Second Mafia War. To outsiders, it looks like chaos. To the Corleonesi clan, led by Salvatore Riina, it is a strategy. They do not negotiate power. They exterminate rivals for it. Over 1981 and 1982, the killing rate spikes. Estimates push toward 1,000 dead among mafia affiliates and their families across Sicily. The violence is not random. It is to consolidate, kill the rivals, kill the witnesses, kill the future competitors, and in the wreckage, the state finds something it has never truly possessed, because survivors of a civil war are different from loyal soldiers. Survivors want exits. Survivors want revenge. Enter Tommaso Buscetta, a boss, a self-described man of honor. And yes, honor is carrying a heavy load in that sentence, considering the heroin roots and murders it decorates. But Buscetta believes in a mafia that once observed boundaries. Riina's mafia recognizes none. Then the war reaches Buscetta bloodline. 2 of his sons vanish and are never found. His brother, nephew, son-in-law, killed in a deliberate chain of annihilation designed to leave him with nothing left to protect. Buscetta flees to Brazil. On October 23, 1983, he is arrested in São Paulo. He attempts suicide rather than face extradition. On June 28, 1984, he arrives in Italy. He tries again. He survives. This is the opening Falcone has spent years preparing for, even if he does not yet know the name. Falcone's insight is that surgical people do not betray the mafia for justice. They betray it for betrayal. Buscetta is disillusioned, gutted by grief, volcanic with fury. He is the profile of a man who might shatter omertà, not from virtue, but from vengeance. So Falcone meets him. Falcone does not do what the mafia expects the Italian state to do. He does not threaten. He does not bribe. He does not lecture. He listens. He treats Buscetta as a man who has lost his entire universe. That is not softness. That is tactics. Because you already know this. Even if you have never interrogated anyone, fear shuts mouths. Dignity opens them. For 45 days, Buscetta becomes a living blueprint, describing the hierarchy, the recruitment rituals, the commission that coordinates families and authorizes killings. Falcone later says, Buscetta gave him the coordinates that allowed him to devise a working method. This becomes known as the Buscetta theorem. Cosa Nostra is not folklore, not atmosphere, not an attitude. It is a unified organization with rules, ranks, and a chain of command. That is the real wall Falcone demolishes. Not the wall of violence, the wall of ambiguity. For a century, Italian courts treated each mafia murder as an isolated act. Falcone now has testimony, cross-referenced with financial records that proves collective structure and collective guilt. But Buscetta draws one line he will not cross. Falcone presses for the final piece, the political connections, the so-called third level, the men who never pull triggers, never sit in courtrooms, and never lose elections. Buscetta refuses, not from loyalty, from survival calculus. The mafia's gunmen are dangerous. The mafia's friends inside the government are untouchable. Falcone files that refusal away. He now understands he is not merely fighting a criminal syndicate. He is fighting a relationship between crime and power. And relationships do not end with handcuffs. They end when the public sees the terms of the deal, which means Falcone's most dangerous enemy may not be the man wiring explosives under a highway. It may be the official who cancels his helicopter surveillance to trim a budget line. Hold that thought. It pays off sooner than you'd expect. If you're finding this story gripping, consider hitting subscribe, because the worst betrayals in Falcone's war come from inside the institutions that were supposed to protect him. Because once Buscetta speaks, others begin to calculate what silence is still buying them. The dam does not break all at once, but the first crack is irreversible. And the question now hanging over Sicily is terrifying not just for the mafia, but for every politician, banker, and police chief who has spent decades pretending the organization does not exist. If Falcone proves Cosa Nostra is a single structured entity, then who has been protecting it? Falcone has his blueprint. Now he has to do something no one in Italian legal history has attempted. He has to put that blueprint on trial. Not one killer, not one extortionist, the entire system. But if Buscetta's testimony proves Cosa Nostra is a unified organization, then who has been protecting it all these years? And what happens when those protectors realize the blueprint exposes them too? February 10th, 1986, Palermo. Nearly 100 defendants are marched through a tunnel connecting Ucciardone prison to a purpose-built high-security courtroom on the prison grounds. They do not walk into a normal court. They walk into a bunker, reinforced concrete, bulletproof glass, 30 steel cages bolted to the floor. Because when your defendants employ assassins, you stop worrying about decor and start worrying about rocket launchers. The courtroom itself is a statement the state is no longer pretending this is ordinary justice. This is war prosecuted under law. Inside, the accused fill those cages while lawyers, journalists, and families pack the room like spectators at a coliseum. The presiding judge, Alfonso Giordano, takes his seat beneath a crucifix mounted on the wall. The symbolism borders on parity faith above law, law above violence, violence waiting in the cages to prove the whole arrangement is fiction. And for months it will feel exactly like that, a performance where the outcome is uncertain, and the audience knows people have died for less than what is being said aloud in this room. This is the Maxi Trial. 475 defendants were sent to trial. An indictment spanning 8,607 pages, stacked high enough to look like furniture. A prosecution built on petition testimony from Buscetta and Salvatore Contorno, cross-referenced against bank records, phone intercepts, seized weapons, and patterns of murder so systematic they read like corporate minutes. Falcone does not ask the court to believe Buscetta on faith. He asks the court to watch Buscetta's claims collide with independent evidence and survive the collision. In Sicily, belief is cheap. Corroboration is unprecedented. The defendants know exactly what corroboration means. They scream from behind their bars. They laugh. They mime threats like a chorus of men who cannot accept that the room has rules now. Some shout insults at Falcone directly, calling him a traitor, a liar, a dead man. The performance is designed to intimidate, to remind every witness, every juror, every journalist in the room that the mafia does not forget and does not forgive. Some are not there at all, fugitives tried in absentia, proof that the mafia still has geography to hide in even while being prosecuted. The anti-mafia pool works like men who know every hour is borrowed. Armored offices, armed escorts. Case files are treated like state secrets, because in Sicily, evidence is not paper. It is a death sentence written in portrait form. And the mafia fights back with a grinding consistency that borders on bureaucratic. Threats, smears, Anonymous letters from so-called crows, designed to rot reputations from within the judiciary itself. Then comes the physical escalation in June 1989. A bag of explosives is discovered at Falcone's seaside villa at Adara, placed just after he had invited visiting Swiss prosecutors. The attempt deepens his suspicion that the danger includes what he calls refined minds inside institutions leaking his movements. He survives, and Sicily does not rally behind him. It questions him. Some voices insinuate the attempt was staged for publicity. Imagine narrowly surviving assassination, then reading in the newspaper that you faked it for attention. The mafia can kill you. The system can humiliate you. Different instruments, identical isolation. After 22 months of proceedings, the verdicts land. December 16, 1987, 338, convicted out of 475 defendants. 19 life sentences for senior leadership, a combined 2,665 years in prison terms. For the first time in Italian legal history, a court formally recognizes Cosa Nostra as a single, hierarchical criminal organization, not a collection of unrelated thugs. A legal earthquake heavy enough that the island cannot pretend it did not feel the tremor. The Buscetta theorem, the idea that the mafia is a unified structure with collective responsibility, survives every legal challenge thrown at it. That recognition changes everything. Here is your moment to exhale. Here is where a simpler story would roll credits. But court victories mean nothing if appeals erase them. And in Italy, appeals are not formalities. They are battlefields. By 1988, the anti-mafia pool is being quietly dismantled. Falcone is passed over when Capinetto retires. Cases are splintered across different magistrates. Momentum hemorrhages. Falcone begins to understand something chilling. He can defeat the mafia in a courtroom and still lose inside the system that built the courtroom. So does he retreat from Palermo? Or does he set the trap that forces the mafia to reveal its final hand? And if the courtroom victory can be dismantled by bureaucrats with pens, what does it take to build something the system cannot quietly erase? Rome, 1991. On paper, Falcone receives a promotion to Director of Penal Affairs at the Ministry of Justice. In practice, he is removed from the front line and handed a desk. Sicily whispers that he is finished. The mafia exhales. Prosecutors who spent years depending on his coordination wonder if the war is over. And this is where Falcone does the most dangerous thing a cornered strategist can do. He uses the desk, because if you cannot fight on the ground, you redesign the ground itself. Because if Palermo is the battlefield, Rome is the arsenal. From the ministry, Falcone drafts the institutional architecture he has lacked for a decade. A national anti-mafia prosecution office, the Direzione Nazionale Antimafia, to coordinate investigations across regions. A dedicated investigative body, the Direzione Investigativa Antimafia, to cut through law enforcement rivalries. Stronger asset seizure procedures to strip bosses of their wealth. A real witness protection framework to make cooperation survivable. These are not reforms. They are weapons designed to outlive the men who build them. He is thinking like an engineer now, not one case. Infrastructure. A machine designed to keep prosecuting after the operator is dead. Because the mafia has always won by outlasting individual prosecutors by waiting for retirement, reassignment, or death to reset the board. Falcone is building something that cannot retire, cannot be reassigned, and does not die when he does. November 1991, Parliament approves the DNA. October 1991, Decree Law 345 establishes the DIA, two new organs inside the body of the Italian state. For the mafia, this is not reform. It is a new species of threat. By spring 1992, the legal ground shifts beneath the mafia's feet. On January 30th, the Court of Cassation, Italy's Supreme Appellate Court, confirms the central convictions of the Maxi Trial and upholds the legal recognition of Cosa Nostra as a unified criminal organization. Sentences the mafia expected to evaporate through appeals become permanent. Life terms stand. The Buscetta theorem survives every legal challenge thrown at it. For the Corleonesi, this is catastrophic. The state is no longer chasing shadows. It is chasing command structures, collective responsibility, the bosses behind the triggers. And Falcone's appointment as national anti-mafia prosecutor is described as a virtual certainty. In April, he takes the international stage at the inaugural session of the UN Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice in Vienna. He warns delegates about the rise of transnational organized crime networks. Then, he flies home to Sicily. 1 month later, the highway explodes. If you are the Corleonesi, that timing feels like a closing window, because a national appointment transforms a mortal enemy into an institution. You can intimidate one judge. You cannot intimidate a system that distributes investigations across 26 judicial districts. Kill Falcone now, and you kill a man. Wait 6 months, and you are fighting a structure that operates independently of any single prosecutor's pulse. He has said it publicly, privately, in print. Judges die when they are isolated, when the state withdraws support, when protection is treated as a budget item rather than a duty, and the evidence of withdrawal is already accumulating. Anonymous letters circulate through Palermo's judicial corridors, painting Falcone as ambitious, narcissistic, power-hungry character assassination, cheaper than explosives, and disturbingly effective in a culture that mistrusts ambition. Some weeks before the attack, helicopter surveillance of his regular route between Punta Raisi Airport and Palermo is discontinued. The reason, given cost savings. The state is pinching pennies on the one man the mafia is about to spend half a ton of explosives to eliminate. Falcone knows the danger. He keeps traveling, because he believes something that sounds naive until you realize it is the only principle that keeps a democracy alive. If the state runs, the mafia becomes the state. Remember the keys. Remember the stupid slowing car. Because on the afternoon of May 23rd, 1992, Falcone's small human habit of pulling keys from the ignition mid-drive shifts the spacing of the convoy by seconds. It changes which vehicle absorbs the center of the blast. In a war between institutions and empires, the outcome pivots on a man fumbling with a keychain. When the countdown reaches 0, the mafia does not simply kill Giovanni Falcone. It detonates a crater into a national highway in front of the entire country, and in doing so, commits the strategic miscalculation that will destroy it. When the countdown reaches 0, will the state he built survive him? And what does it cost a democracy when the people trying to save it die alone on disconnected highways? The explosion does not just kill 5 people. It tears open the story Italy has spent a century trying not to read. Television programming halts across every major network. Parliament declares national mourning. The footage of a crater where asphalt used to be, twisted metal steaming in the Mediterranean sun loops on every screen in the country. The scale of the attack is impossible to ignore, impossible to downplay, impossible to absorb into the usual machinery of denial. This is not a back alley murder. This is a declaration of war on a public highway. Crowds flood Palermo's streets and scream at the political class with a fury that does not fade on schedule. Bedsheets painted with anti-mafia slogans hang from apartment balconies across the city, a public declaration of rage from people who had been silent for generations. At Falcone's funeral, the widow of bodyguard Vito Schifani addresses the mafia directly from the altar, demanding repentance, her voice cracking through the cathedral like a verdict the courts never issued. This time, the outrage does not evaporate. The state responds with emergency measures, troop deployments, roadblocks, but more critically, it implements the tools Falcone spent his Rome exile designing. The witness protection framework he drafted becomes operational. Suddenly, cooperation with prosecutors is not just an act of bravery, it is survivable. Hundreds of mafia affiliates come forward in months, not decades. Convicted bosses are transferred into the 41BS hard prison regime, solitary confinement, restricted communication, total severance from their command networks. The state stops treating mafia incarceration as a formality. Behind the scenes, investigators do what Falcone trained them to do. They follow money, they follow communications, they follow organizational structure. In January 1993, Salvatore Riina, the boss of bosses, fugitive for 23 years, is arrested on a Palermo street. A man who built an aura of godlike invulnerability, caught in an unmarked car, looking like a retired farmhand. Not a deity, just a man in handcuffs. This is the part people misunderstand. They assume the mafia murdered Falcone because it was powerful. The opposite is closer to the truth. The mafia murdered Falcone because it was cornered. It killed him because his method turned invisibility into evidence. It killed him because his reforms transformed isolated prosecutors into a coordinated national machine. It killed him because he made silence more expensive than confession. And when Cosa Nostra detonated 500 kilograms of explosive beneath a public highway, it admitted the one thing it never wanted to admit. There existed a servant of the state it could not buy, could not intimidate, and could not outlast. Falcone once said that the mafia is a human phenomenon. It had a beginning, and it will have an end. That sentence sounds hopeful, but it is also a warning. Human phenomena end only when humans decide to end them, not when they hope, not when they mourn, not when they hang bedsheets from their balconies, when they decide and keep deciding year after year, past the point where outrage fades and budgets tighten and the next election makes silence convenient again. 57 days after the Capaci bombing, on July 19, 1992, in Palermo's Via D'Amelio, another car bomb detonates. It kills Falcone's closest ally, Judge Paolo Borsellino, and 5 members of his police escort. Agostino Catalano, Emanuela Loi, the first woman in Italy's police escort service to die in the line of duty, Walter Eddie Cosina, Vincenzo Limuli, Claudio Traina, another judge, another crater, another proof that ideas can survive an explosion, but the people who carry them cannot. The machine Falcone built kept running. And if you want to see what happens when the same war moves underground, literally, watch the video on screen now. In 1990, the DEA discovered a trapdoor pool table revealing a fully engineered super tunnel under the US border with concrete walls, lights, rail tracks, and ventilation built to move tons of cocaine undetected. Decades of radar, seismic sensors, thermal imaging, and robots failed to stop it. Because the border isn't a line, it's a 3D battlefield. Click here.